At least 38 people have died and 150 are missing after a powerful earthquake hit central Italy. Entire areas have been reduced to rubble. The quake was strong enough to be felt across the length of the country. Rescue teams are still pulling people from the rubble of their homes. Most will have been asleep in their beds when the quake happened. We'll bring you the latest and be asking why Italy is so susceptible to major tremors. Also this lunchtime, more questions over Jeremy Corbyn's claims that he couldn't find a seat on a train. The Labour leader defends his version of events. A British backpacker is stabbed to death in Australia. The suspect reportedly shouted in Arabic during the attack. Were you there? Police launch an appeal to trace 15 fans to help them in their criminal investigation into the Hillsborough disaster. And calls for a ban on microbeads in cosmetics and toiletries because of the damage they do to sea life.
In the south, ambulance workers under assault. Another rise in attacks on paramedics. And the little girl who loved to swim granted her final wish.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the BBC News at 1. At least 38 people are dead and 150 are missing after an earthquake caused widespread damage across towns and villages in central Italy. It hit at just after 3:30 in the morning and was felt from Bologna in the north of the country to Naples in the south. One of the villages near the epicentre was levelled to the ground, while the town of Amatrice was reduced to rubble. Rescue services are continuing to search for people trapped under the debris. With the latest, here's our correspondent, Katrina Renton.
The devastation tells the story. Lives lost, towns destroyed, walls ripped from homes, leaving them like dolls' houses, as people try to come to terms with what has happened.
On one side, the whole wall fell, but it did not hit me. The other side also fell, very, very close to me, and luckily it didn't hit me. Then the whole ceiling fell on my head. I just managed to put a pillow on my head and I wasn't hit.
We're alive because we escaped from the window.
The earthquake struck at 3:30 in the morning, reaching a magnitude of 6.2. So strong it cracked the roads. The worst hit areas, the small towns of Accumoli and Amatrice. Here, a little girl is pulled from the rubble. And this rescuer asks a trapped man if he can breathe as they wait for more help. Emergency services and helicopters scour the area, searching for those who are still missing.
In difficult moments, Italy knows what to do. When things don't go so well, the whole of Italy, all together, shows its most beautiful face. So we pledge all together that no family, no city, no hamlet will be left alone. And let's get to work, because the next hours we can save more human lives from the debris, and we can give a hope to those territories badly affected.
The earthquake could be felt across large swathes of the country. This woman was sleeping 70 kilometres away from its centre.
It really felt quite strong, the earthquake. For it to move a double bed from the left side of the room to the right side of the room with me on it, and the wardrobes and the chest of drawers were jumping up and down.
People are working together, trying to accept what has happened and salvage all they can. Local communities are left distraught. As time goes on and more help arrives, the true extent of this damage will be revealed. Katrina Renton, BBC News.
Well, our correspondent James Reynolds is in Amatrice for us now. And James, can you now describe what you're seeing?
There's a very busy scene in front of me. I'd say more than 100 relief workers have made their way into the centre. What remains of this town. There are destroyed buildings on either side. A little earlier, I saw relief workers pull a woman alive from the rubble and they got her onto a stretcher. But I've also seen relief carry out the bodies of at least 6 people, including 1 young child. Many of the survivors have walked quietly down the hill towards the valley, carrying whatever they can. One man simply was in his underwear, carrying a suitcase. These people have simply been sobbing, calling up relatives. And equally, there's been another journey up the hill of relatives across Italy who'd heard about this, knew that someone was here, and they've raced up to find their family member trapped in the rubble. There is one building in front of me which may have 7 people still trapped inside.
OK. James, thank you very much indeed. James Reynolds there. Well, today's earthquake isn't the first to hit the region. Our science correspondent Jonathan Amos is here with me now. And Jonathan, they are sadly quite a frequent occurrence.
Yeah, unfortunately, people will remember the L'Aquila event in 2009. 300 people died then. Go back further in time, this Apennine region, the mountain range that runs through Italy, 30,000 people died in 1915. 1703, they actually had 3 earthquakes in 1 year, similar in size to this, and that resulted in 10,000 deaths. So, yes, they are relatively frequent.
And why is Italy so prone to having these tremors?
Well, the geology of Italy actually is fiendishly complicated, but scientists see the Tyrrhenian basin, the big sea to the west of Italy, gradually opening up, and this is pulling on the Apennine Mountains. Some of these mountain peaks are also very high, so gravity's pulling down on them, and the forces combine to rupture the many faults in the region, and unfortunately, earthquakes are the consequence.
The effects are so devastating here because the earthquakes happen very shallow in the Earth's crust in Italy, and that's just due to the nature of the faults. So they really are quite small faults, and that means that the epicenter is shallow in the crust, and so the shaking is felt very dramatically right above where that earthquake happens.
Now, Rita, we expect some of the old buildings to fail, especially if they haven't been retrofitted with devices and strengthening measures. One of the concerning things about L'Aquila back in 2009 was that too many of the modern buildings also underperformed. So there's going to be a critical eye, I think, here to see how the modern stock has got on. Remember, it's not the shaking that kills people, it's collapsed buildings that kills people. And likewise, it's good engineering that saves lives.
OK, Jonathan, thank you. Well, for more details about the earthquake and the race to find survivors, you can, of course, go to our website, which is bbc.co.uk/news. Jeremy Corbyn has attempted to shed more light on the row over train seating, insisting he'd been unable to find 2 free seats together for him and his wife until train staff helped him. The spat between the Labour leader and Virgin Trains occurred after the company took issue with a video showing Mr Corbyn sitting on the floor complaining about ram-packed carriages and then calling for public ownership of the railways. Here's Glenn Campbell.
The only thing Jeremy Corbyn wanted to talk about today was the National Health Service and his plans to end private healthcare provision within NHS England. So when a journalist asked him about his row with Virgin Trains, he wasn't happy.
Can we have an NHS question?
We live in a free country.
I know. I'm very well aware we live in a free country, and I'm very proud to live in a free country, as are you.
He didn't disguise his irritation at being asked why he'd appeared to walk past empty seats on an 11 o'clock from King's Cross to Newcastle.
Yes, I did walk through the train. Yes, I did look for 2 empty seats together so I could sit down with my wife to talk to her. That wasn't possible.
Today this train is completely ram-packed.
Jeremy Corbyn was filmed sitting on the train floor because his team said there were no free seats. Now Mr Corbyn seems to be saying the problem was he couldn't find 2 seats together. Virgin Trains has published onboard security camera images which they say shows Mr Corbyn walking past empty unreserved seats in one coach, reserved but unoccupied seats in another, before being given a seat 45 minutes into his 3-hour journey. This isn't just about seats on trains, it's also about whether or not the leader of the official opposition here at Westminster gave an honest account of his train journey, and his rival in the Labour leadership contest made no effort to back him up.
But what is clear from the footage that I've seen is that he had a seat on the train, and there were seats on the train, and he chose to sit on the floor for the purposes of the video.
But Team Corbyn insist he's done nothing wrong.
Jeremy's a man of principle and a man of integrity, and if you look at all of the polls, it actually shows that he, of any other politician, is one of the most trusted.
Jeremy Corbyn's discomfort on a train is now causing him some strain as he campaigns to keep the Labour leadership.
Well, while the train route continued, Owen Smith, who's challenging Jeremy Corbyn for the leadership of the Labour Party, said if he won, he would try to stop the Prime Minister from starting official talks to leave the European Union. Let's go back to Glenn Campbell, who's in Westminster for us now. And Glenn, there's been a development.
Yes, on the row over the trains, the Information Commissioner's office has said that it's looking into the release of the CCTV footage from the train to decide whether it should launch a formal investigation into the decision by Virgin Trains to do that under the Data Protection Act. Separately, Owen Smith has apologised to anyone who might be offended when he said that he wouldn't be a lunatic leader of the Labour Party. He's also denied that that comment was in any way a reference to Jeremy Corbyn. Today, Mr Smith has been campaigning on Brexit. Of course, the EU referendum result divided the country, but it also divides the two contenders for the Labour leadership in terms of how the vote should be dealt with. Mr Smith wants to overturn it. At the very least, he wants Labour to use its voting power in Parliament to stop the government from triggering the process to begin the Brexit negotiations unless Theresa May promises to give people another vote, either a referendum vote or in a general election, to have a final say on the deal that is actually negotiated. Jeremy Corbyn has repeatedly made clear that he thinks the original Brexit decision should be respected.
OK, Glenn, thank you. Glenn Campbell there. 2-year-old Michaela Brunius, who was swept into the sea at Newquay at the weekend, has died. She and her family were on holiday in Newquay when they were hit by a huge wave. Her father, Rudy, died shortly after the incident. The tragedy happened as gales hit Wales and southern and central England. A 21-year-old British woman has been stabbed to death at a backpackers hostel in Australia. She's been named as Mia Ailif Chung and is believed to be from Derbyshire. Police say the suspect, who's 29 and from France, shouted Allahu Akbar, meaning God is greatest, during the attack at Home Hill in Queensland. Andy Moore reports.
Friends said she was always smiling and full of life. This was Mia just a few days ago on her way to work on a farm. But it was at the backpackers hostel where she was living that she was attacked. One 30-year-old man, another Briton, was seriously wounded. An Australian man, believed to be the hostel manager, was slightly injured. A dog was also killed during the rampage. The attacker was a 29-year-old French national. Police say they're investigating an act of individual criminal behaviour that's unrelated to race or religion, despite comments he made.
It is alleged that the suspect used the phrase Allah Akbar during the attack and when arrested by police. Whilst this information will be factored into the investigation, we are not ruling out any motivations at this early stage, whether they be political or criminal.
Police say they're also considering mental health and drug misuse as possible factors. Mia Ailif Chung came from Derbyshire but had been working in Australia for several weeks. Many friends have paid tribute. One said she was the bubbliest and most caring girl she knew. Another said that heaven had gained an amazing and beautiful soul. Andy Moore, BBC News.
The time is just coming up to 14 minutes past 1, our top story this lunchtime. At least 38 people have died and 150 are missing after a powerful earthquake hit central Italy. Rescue teams are still pulling people from the rubble of their homes. Most will have been asleep in their beds when the quake happened.
In South today at 1:30, the Basingstoke nurse who gave up her job to fight Ebola in West Africa.
And we're live from Hampshire's Ageas Bowl, where England are taking on Pakistan. 18,000 fans expected, and they're in good voice.
A world worldwide ban on plastic microbeads in cosmetics should be imposed as soon as possible, according to a group of MPs. The Environmental Audit Committee says the tiny balls of plastic used in shower gels and face scrubs can be found in Arctic sea ice and on the ocean floor. The MPs say synthetic fibres from warm car tyres and even fleece jackets are also harming wildlife. Our environment correspondent Roger Harrabin reports.
Hard to believe it, but our shampoos, shower gels and toothpastes are harming wildlife at sea. Many bathroom products are manufactured with tiny plastic beads to make them gently abrasive. These beads flush through the sewers and get eaten by small creatures. The plastic clogs their gut and stops them eating properly. The MPs say they should be banned.
We want the government to institute a national ban to deal with the national problem that we have here in the UK. We'd also like to see the government working with other European countries and the cosmetics industry to get that ban rolled out across the European Union.
But not just micro beads. Fleece jackets made from waste plastic bottles shed fibres when they're washed. These fibres get into sea creatures too. Another huge and little discussed source of microplastics is the material rubbed off car tyres, and even the fibres eroded from road markings. Add to these the conventional easy-to-see plastics, like bags, bottles and discarded fishing gear, and there's an accidental human assault on the seas. The MPs say banning microbeads would at least be a start. Roger Harrabin, BBC News.
Scotland's economy has been hit by falling oil prices, according to new figures. Scotland's share of tax revenues from North Sea oil and gas plummeted by 97% in the last year, leaving an overall government deficit of nearly £15 billion. But there has been growth in other areas of the economy. Our Scotland correspondent Stephen Godden is in Glasgow for us now. So, Stephen, how do you read these figures?
Well, first of all, they underline the importance of oil to Scotland's public finances. Last year, we saw for the first time reflected in these figures the impact of the oil slump, and that pattern has continued. Let me run you through some of the headlines. First of all, the deficit. That stands at £14.8 billion. That's almost 10% of GDP, overall economic output. And to compare that with the UK figure is 4%. The second thing to look at is this share of oil revenue, the overall tax take. Now, last year that stood at £1.8 billion. That's down this year to £60 million, a 97% slump. But it should be said that that's been offset by revenue generated by the likes of income tax and VAT.
And Stephen, what reaction has there been to these figures?
Well, this doesn't have any impact on the Scottish Government's budget, so its significance is political. What we've seen, it plays into the debate about Scottish independence. Those in favour of the Union say that the figures weaken the case for independence. We've heard from the Scottish Secretary, David Mundell, this morning, who says that being part of the UK protects Scots' living standards and has allowed them to what he calls weather the oil slump. The First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, for her part, she knew they would make uncomfortable reading, but she says that the fundamentals of the economy are strong. And this morning she returned to a theme that she began yesterday, which was the biggest threat, she says, to Scotland's overall long-term economic prospects is the vote to leave the EU.
Thank you, Stephen. Turkish tanks have crossed into Syria and have been attacking forces of the so-called Islamic State, helped by aircraft from the US-led coalition. Turkey says it wants to drive IS from the border region, but also admits that its forces are attacking Kurdish militants in northern Syria. Detectives leading a criminal investigation into the Hillsborough disaster have released CCTV images of 19 men that they want to speak to. 96 fans were killed as a result of the crush at the football ground in Sheffield in April 1989. Senior officers have stressed that the men pictured had done nothing wrong. Judith Moritz reports.
24,000 Liverpool fans were at Hillsborough in 1989. The crowd built up outside the Leppings Lane end of the ground before kick-off. Now, detectives say they want to speak to a selection of supporters, including these two men. 19 fans have been highlighted on camera footage, which has been specially enhanced. They were all near to Gate C when it was opened at 8 minutes to 3. Thousands of supporters poured through it onto the already full terraces. Investigators say the men they've selected aren't suspects, but may have useful evidence for the ongoing criminal inquiry.
By focusing on these 19 individuals, their experience may be able to add to what we already know and indeed have greater value. We want to understand what they've heard and what they've seen as they've gone through Gate C.
The match commander, David Duckenfield, accepted that he ordered the gate to be opened. At the recent inquests, the jury found that the 96 people who died were unlawfully killed and that Mr Duckenfield was responsible for manslaughter by gross negligence. The fans were exonerated of any blame. Some bereaved relatives have been critical of the new appeal for witnesses.
A jury at the Hillsborough inquest has fully established who the person was who authorised the opening of Gate C. So I want to know why they are so insistent on pursuing this area.
Investigators at Operation Resolve say that some of the Hillsborough families have raised concerns with them before, which have been considered, but that their job is to conduct a thorough and impartial inquiry into what happened on the day of the disaster. A separate criminal investigation is looking into the behaviour of the police after the disaster. A decision on prosecutions is expected next year. Judith Moritz, BBC News, Sheffield.
An 87-year-old man who shot his wife at a care home has been told his sentence will begin in a secure hospital and then continue in prison if and when his health improves. Ronald King was cleared of murder after the trial judge directed the jury to accept a plea of manslaughter by diminished responsibility. His wife, Rita King, was shot at Delamere House Care Home in Walton, Essex last December. Well, Ellie Price is in Chelmsford for us now. Ellie.
Well, Rita's sentencing Ronald King in the last hour. The judge said there was no doubt he was a devoted husband and that he had tried to look after his wife. But he also said this was not a mercy killing in the usual sense of the phrase, and that Mr King's own dementia, although may have played a part in his diminished responsibility, did not do so entirely. They'd been married for more than 50 years. But in December last year, Ronald King decided his 81-year-old wife, Rita, who had dementia, had suffered enough. He decided to move into this care home over Christmas so that he could spend the time with her. Then, a couple of days after Boxing Day, he shot her. The care home manager was one of the first to see him after it happened.
I could see Ron with a gun in his hand, but he still had his hand on the trigger. And I managed to get my hand on top of the gun, and I wasn't going to let go. And I just said, please, Ron, please, please let go of this gun. Don't let's hurt anybody else.
Ronald King used this gun, a World War II revolver that had been owned by his wife's father. The court heard the couple had breakfast together in the care home's dining room before he took her into the lounge area. In front of two other elderly residents, he shot her once in the head. He then kissed her on the lips and said goodbye.
I think I was a little bit stunned, unbelieving, really, that something like that could happen in here. And how could a man shoot his own wife?
Ronald King told the court he had planned to turn the gun on himself, but just couldn't do it. Now the 87-year-old must battle his own dementia alone, without his beloved wife. Well, Mr King gave no reaction as his 6-year sentence was read out, and he was led away in his wheelchair and taken to a special mental health ward at the St Andrew's Hospital in Northampton. He'll be assessed there, and if his health is deemed to have improved, he'll be moved to prison. Rita.
Ellie, thank you. And now some news just in. A serving member of the British Armed Forces has been arrested on suspicion of Northern Ireland-related terrorism offences. The 30-year-old man was arrested in Somerset on suspicion of being involved in the preparation of acts of terrorism. A police officer who served for 20 years has successfully sued Scotland Yard after it unlawfully obtained details of where she and her daughter had been on holiday. Andrea Brown had taken a break whilst on sick leave. She won her case for breach of human rights and misuse of private information last month. Our legal affairs correspondent Clive Coleman reports.
Andrea Brown has just won a 3-year legal battle against the Metropolitan Police.
I'm not a criminal, my daughter isn't a criminal. I just can't understand why they would feel justified in taking the action that they did. It was totally excessive.
She joined the Met in 1993, rising to become a detective constable. While on sick leave with depression in 2011, her father died of cancer and she took her mother and daughter to visit family in Barbados. She told her Police Federation representative about the trip, but only informed her line manager when she got back.
It was here at Sutton Police Station in South London that senior officers decided to use the powers they'd been given to investigate crime to obtain personal data on Andrea Brown, one of their own.
In relation to what was a minor disciplinary matter, Detective Inspector Sarah Rees applied to the National Border Targeting Centre, staffed by Greater Manchester Police, and, citing a non-existent law, approved an application to Virgin Atlantic for details of Andrea Brown's travel.
She hadn't filled in the boxes. She hadn't given a reason why she wanted the information. She hadn't signed it. She hadn't got it authorised. But yet she was able to obtain 5 years' worth of information about my travel movements. So she's managed to obtain information about me and my daughter using a police act that doesn't exist.
Andrea Brown sued the Metropolitan and Greater Manchester Police for breach of data protection, human rights and misuse of personal information. She won, although another misconduct claim failed. In court, the judge was withering about Detective Inspector Sarah Rees. He said she appeared glib, almost flippant, and expressed his astonishment at her loose and casual grasp of the law. For Andrea Brown, the case was about a point of principle.
I wanted justice. The police are supposed to be upholding the law, and we're not above the law. They're not above the law. They shouldn't be allowed to do what they want to do just because they're in a position of power.
Andrea Brown has left the Met. The force won't comment on the case as a final ruling on damages is pending. Greater Manchester Police says it acknowledges the judgment. Clive Coleman, BBC News.
European football's governing body UEFA will soon have a new leader after the suspension of the former president Michel Platini over claims of corruption. For whoever takes over, it's a time of uncertainty, with Europe's biggest clubs pushing for major change to the Champions League. Our sports news correspondent Richard Conway has been to Slovenia to meet one of the frontrunners for the job.
It's world football's most prestigious club competition.
Celtic are bound for the group stage of the UEFA Champions League.
But Europe's top sides are demanding changes. The English Premier League's new £9 billion TV deal is the main cause of concern. Last season, Real Madrid took home £81 million for winning the Champions League. But the club finishing in last place in this season's Premier League will receive a massive £97 million. Europe's big clubs now want UEFA to deliver a significant increase in TV rights revenue, fearing they are at a serious competitive disadvantage. Now, one of the leading contenders to be the new UEFA president, Alexander Ceferin, says there will be consequences if clubs break away to create a new Super League.
Some kind of closed Super League with just a few clubs in, that is out of the question, and it will mean a kind of war between UEFA and clubs. Champions League is the best sports product in the world, for sure, but it doesn't generate the most money. We should just include them more with dialogue, which is very important. We can manage.
Did you do a deal with Mr. Blatter over the 2011 election? Michel Platini was forced to stand aside as UEFA president last year after a FIFA ethics investigation banned him from football. Now the race is on to succeed him, with the little-known Slovenian FA chief up against two vastly experienced football politicians.
UEFA, at this moment, needs fresh blood to try to say that only the one who is there for 30 years could lead UEFA. It's quite silly.
Slovenia may well be one of the smaller countries in Europe, but the president of its football association, well, he has big ambitions. His message now, just ahead of these elections, is that only he can be a uniting force for the European game. This summer's Euros in France highlighted a number of problems football must tackle, whoever wins this election. Tougher action is promised. and so too a hope that fixing problems will allow greater focus on the field of play. Richard Conway, BBC News, Slovenia.
The world's largest aircraft, the Airlander 10, has been damaged after a nosedive during a test flight. The 320-foot-long aircraft, part plane and part airship, landed heavily as it returned to its base at Cardington Airfield in Bedfordshire. It's hoped that eventually the £25 million vehicle will be able to stay aloft for 5 days. The developer, HAV, says the crew are safe and well. Time for a look now at the weather with Darren Bett. And Darren, it's a lovely day outside in most places.
Yes, today actually could be the hottest day of the year. Temperatures are going to get very close to that. Now, I would normally start with a lovely sunny picture, but we had some great Weather Watcher pictures of the aurora last night. We had some sent in from Aberdeen. This one was a little further south in North Yorkshire. And that picture was actually taken before we saw a bit of cloud coming down from the northwest. That has since tended to break up. And ahead of that last night, the temperature in Kent in some areas got no lower than 21 Celsius. And since then, we've seen temperatures rocketing only across more eastern parts of England towards the southeast. This is where we've got the hot air. Further north and west, it's a little cooler and more manageable. In between, we've got a weather front. It's very slow moving, and for most of the afternoon, that's just a diffuse area of cloud. And either side of that, we've got some sunshine. Now, yesterday we had a lot of cloud in the southwest of Scotland. Today, it's beautiful and sunny here in Troon, and there won't be much cloud at all across Scotland through the rest of the afternoon. It's warmer than yesterday too, and it's a similar story for Northern Ireland. Things are a little different though, as we'll see a little more cloud coming into Northern England later on in the afternoon. Those temperatures already up to 32 in the southeast of England and East Anglia, could climb even higher. But it's cooler further west. Temperatures not as high as yesterday. There's more cloud around as well, especially in the southwest. And just across the Channel, there's a few thunderstorms. And during the latter part of the afternoon through the evening, we may see a few of those showers heading northwards, spells of showery rain pushing north overnight across England and Wales. Rather hit and miss, but a lot of cloud, a muggy feel. Another warm night to come, but something cooler and fresher for Scotland and Northern Ireland, where we'll have clear skies. And here tomorrow, we'll see some sunshine, maybe just 1 or 2 showers. These are the main zones of showers. Could be some thunder and lightning in those, particularly across northern England during the afternoon. As the showers begin to fade away, though, in the south, a little more sunshine. Now, under the rain, it's going to be cooler, certainly, but in the sunshine elsewhere, we're looking at temperatures typically the low 20s. Warm still in the southeast, but nowhere near as hot as today. By the time we get to Friday, those storms should have moved away. We could see some rain just for a time for Northern Ireland, pushing into Scotland. Sunshine for many areas and feeling quite pleasant, actually, with light winds. Temperatures generally around about the low 20s again. Despite more cloud in the southeast, again, this is where it's going to be warmest. And the warm air really never leaves the southeast of England. As we head into the holiday weekend, though, we could see some more storms developing. Heavy rain at first, mainly for Northern England at this stage, giving way to some sunshine and showers. Showers becoming fewer, more sunshine, and it will feel warmer, especially in the south. Rita.
Thank you, Darren. Now a reminder of our top story this lunchtime. At least 38 people have died and 150 are missing after a powerful earthquake hit central Italy. Rescue teams are still pulling people from the rubble of their homes. Most were asleep in their beds when the quake happened. Well, that's all from us. Now on BBC One, it's time for the news where you are. Have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.